Okay, now let's create a simple project demo to practice our useEffect and useState learning. We'll break it down into a simple, easy to understand steps. Our goal is to create a to-do list application using Next.js and fetching data from an API using Axios, and styling our application with Tailwind CSS could just make us easy to do the styling. But most important is just to understand how to handle asynchronous data fetching with useEffect. So let's get into coding. So we need to trigger an API call first so we can get list of to-dos. And usually in the class component, we used to do that in a component will mount or component did mount, if you come from an older background in React. But in functional component, with the new hooks, we use the useEffect to handle the life cycle of our component instead. So we have to call the useEffect, and we said that we need to load this data only first time the component mounts. So we will add an empty array as dependency. And if you remember, this one means that the useEffect will run only the first time when the component renders. Now we come right inside here and let's try triggering our API call. And if I paste this one as an example, you'll see, let me add a catch. You'll see that the await is having an underline red beneath it. And that's because unfortunately useEffect can't be async directly. I can't come here and say async or just even before it right there. I can't do these things, okay? So, and the reason why is useEffect does not support async functions directly. It's because it's expecting a cleanup function that or nothing to be returned, not a promise, okay? So if you remember from previous video that the useEffect have an optional call, okay, which is the return function, and this function runs every time your component want to render before it runs next time the code inside here, okay? So basically that's the reason useEffect can't be async. Now what to do? Well, there is a way that you can work around this, which is defining another async function inside useEffect. And why we're doing inside useEffect? Because we don't need it anywhere else at the moment. So I'll declare a function const fetch to-dos. This will be async function, and inside now here we will have our try catch blocks. And let's get our API call done. So if I do this, you can see now the await is not underlined with the red error line because we have now async within our function. Let me copy my API endpoint and I will add this link for you in the description of this video. I will just paste this one right there. Okay, now we get our data. Then what we will do with it, how my component or my child component will know about it? Well, that's when the states comes in our magical box. We will store this new data in there. Okay, so for that I'll come first here before my useEffect and I will declare my state. So my first state will be name is to-dos, and I will have set to-dos. And if you remember in the previous video, the useState or any React hooks, basically they are just functions, okay? And useState by default is a function which help us to get a state and a function that help us to set that state, okay? And in the standards, these two basically call them anything you want, but the way I follow is if my state is to-dos, then I keep the same thing in my setter function and just add a set before it. So when you have longer applications or bigger applications, it's easy for you to track all these setters function, okay? Now we need to set up a default value as well, so it will be an empty array, because we know by default that this to-dos will give us an array of elements. So by default I'll give empty array, and I can show you here. If I copy this and paste it in the browser, you will get all the array of the objects, and also you can see what values or attributes or properties you have within your object. Okay, now back to my code. I created my state. I have a setter function. Now how I can set my state with the new data? It's very simple, very easy. All what I have to do, call my setter function, set to dos, and pass my response dot data. Easy as that. And now my to do will have the values here. Okay, now we defined our function, but you can see we didn't trigger it yet. So I'll just come right here before my optional, and I will trigger my to-dos. Now go back to my UI, and still I can't see anything, and reason why is because I didn't pass my to-do to the list of my components. So I will just add to-do in here instead of the empty array. Save, and there we go. So I already have component created here. It's using Taiwan CSS for styling. Don't focus on the styling because it's not the topic of this video, but Taiwan CSS is just a library which helps you to style with predefined classes. So I use that to make my work much more easier and quicker for these demos. And you can see here what we have done is that we just map on to-dos, and what we said, okay, depend on the class or depend on the attribute of completed within to-do. If you can see here, we have completed, so some are false, some are true. So we're saying basically if it's completed, then make it green. If it's not completed, make it red. Standard as that. Okay, now let me close this one. Now other things we can do is handling the loading, for example, handling the error states. How we can do that? Again, it's the same thing, because we have to listen to the API, and depending on that, then we have to see if it's loading or if it is having error, which means these values are changing as well, right? They are not static values. Same thing again, we have to use the useState. Again, some people may ask why you're not using variables. Variables does not trigger the components to render again, which means when the component doesn't trigger, the UI or the piece of code of your HTML will not be having access to the new values. Okay, the useState, whenever it triggers, for example, we set here to-dos, this one will trigger another load of your component, and I can show you basically that one happening. Let me come here, inspect, I'll make this one bigger, and go to profiler. Okay, and I will trigger the load, so it will load for me and record for me the performance as well. Trigger. Okay, now it's done. I'll stop it, and then you can see here we have 5 commits. Okay, the one more I'm interested into is my actual component. So this is the list, and this one is to-dos list. Okay, so you can see this one, it run 3 times. Okay, 3 times. So the first time is because your component first time renders, of course. Then the second time because it says one hook has changed. Okay, you see here, one hook number 1 is changed, and again the list of the hooks or numbers I par orders. So hook number 1 for me, the first one here in the list is useState for set to dos. Okay, that's the one triggering. Now the second one is because the hook 1 again changed. Okay, so basically what it does is the first time our component renders, hook number 1 run because we set a default value. Okay, then hook number 1 again run in the third run because that's when I use effect run and I fetch my API, then I set my to-dos. I hope that makes sense. Okay, now let's stop this. I'll clean up that, go back to my console, and let's handle the loading state, for example. Okay, so let's do const, and I say loading, and then I say set loading useState, and I'll say by default is false. Okay, or because maybe I know it's API will trigger the first time the component re-enters, I can just say the initial value will be true. Okay, to skip one more call here. So what I will say is when my call is finished, I set my to-dos, then I'll set my loading as well to false, means my API call is finished. Okay, same thing if an error happened, so I'll just have here parameter, which I'll use later, and I'll say okay, set loading to false because my API finished and error happened. Okay, but my loading is done, I'm not listening to the API waiting for it. Then you can have here, before you return function, you can have, for example, handling state. You can have a spinner on your screen, you can have anything. So what I will do, I will say if loading is true, then I want, for example, just return for now a div and say loading. Okay, simple as that. Let me refresh my screen now, and you can see the loading on the left. So that's why the API is running. It's too fast because the API is quick, but you can compare it between there and the API being triggered. Okay, now let's see the profiler, how it handled that. I go back to my profiler. So basically I have one more hook being also triggered in here. So let's reload the profiler and record. Close off, and let's see now what happened. Now we go down again to our home. So that's my component, the first one. You see there's no child yet, so this component says it rendered again 3 times, and let's see why that happened. See, the second one there's nothing, it just some behind the scene re-renders. This one just hit hot reload, which means really nothing happened. Then we come here and you say here, why this one rendered? Because hook number 1 and 2 changed. Okay, so basically the first one it rendered because it is the first render. Okay, the second render is the initial render, which is this one. Okay, so it's setting up the default values, hook number 1 and hook number 2. Okay, look, hook number 1 and 2 changed, that's why it rendered. Now same thing we can do for the error, same. So again we declare again a new state. Okay, and reason again why it is a state and not a normal variable, it's just because I wanted when I set an error, if an error happened, I want my component to re-enter, so it can pick up the new error and display whatever UI managing I'm doing. Okay, error, set error, use state, and to be empty string in beginning. Okay, so this one, as you might be thinking, to be only triggered in one place, which is here, and it will be, for example, error, or I can just say, for example, some message, and error occurred. Okay, just bear with me, my spellings, I'm not that good. So I'll just see now down here, and same thing we did for loading. For error you can have different scenarios, but for sake of this video we just do a simple one. I'll say again if it's error, maybe you can navigate to another screen, for example, it can be anything, or display a broken robot image or anything you want. So I'll just say error happened, for example, or I can just access the actual error message by saying error. Okay, now let me see if I can break this. And how to refresh, loading, and you see an error occurred, and you see 404. Okay, it didn't happen, and that's why I say Axios is really good. You don't have to do a lot of promises and all these things to handle APIs. Just try and catch block, and it will catch for you any errors happened. Let me revert this and click save. Now let's look at our profiler and see what happened. Again, I will do same thing. I will keep this error happening actually, so I see what's going on. Now I will hard reload and start profiling. Stop it, and then let's see now what happened. Okay, so that's my index component, and says it rendered twice. Okay, and first time it renders because it's the first time the component renders. This one again is nothing all gray, nothing, it's just a hard reload of the browser. And then the second one, and it says because hook number 2 and 3 has changed. Okay, and you can see hook number 2 and hook number 3 has changed, which is inside your catch block. So you see that the hooks are performed in order. Just keep that in mind. When you run your components, the hooks are running in order. And when you come to debugging, it's a kind of helpful as well. You know, you just can see the message and you can go count and find which one has really triggered the re-enter of your components. So that's it for the demo today. Wait for the next one. We will continue this list where we will make it really interactive. If you see now, it just let me hard reload this one first. It's just very static, so we want to be able to tick the options and make them more actionable and more interactive. So stay tuned. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section, and even if you have any requests about some tutorials or anything you want to learn about the front end, just let me know in the comment section and I will be taking care of it for you.